Good evening, class. Today we will be talking about how to use parallel lines and this thing that we just learned about transversals. We are going to be starting proofs with this a little bit, so you're going to need to write down some of these theorems and postulates and memorize them and know when to use them. Today's goal is that you will be able to learn how lines being parallel affects the different angles that we learned in the last video. The angles formed by a transversal. You should also be able to justify why angles are congruent or supplementary based on their position in the diagram. The first thing that we have to talk about is the corresponding angles postulate. Again, I can't prove this to you, it just is. If I have two parallel lines, such as line N and line P here, they are marked to be parallel with this red arrow. Because they are marked such, they are parallel. Then, the pairs of the corresponding angles are congruent. Every single pair of corresponding angles, in this case, have to be congruent because lines N and P are parallel. So, angle 1 and angle 5 here, they're corresponding. They have to be congruent because of the corresponding angles postulate. Those lines are parallel, which forces angle 1 and angle 5 to be congruent. Same thing with angle 2 and angle 6, angle 3 and angle 7, and angle 4 and angle 8. The alternate interior angles, it's almost exactly the same phrasing as the corresponding angles postulate, except for because of the corresponding angles postulate, I can prove these other three. The alternate interior angles theorem, it's provable. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, such as lines N and P, they're both parallel and they're cut by the transversal line M. Now, the pairs of alternate interior angles are congruent. 3 and 6 is one pair, so I can say angle 3 and angle 6 are congruent. Angle 4 and angle 5 are another pair of alternate interior angles. They also end up being congruent here. That's all that this theorem says. Same thing with alternate exterior. The only thing that now changes is that now we're talking about exterior angles instead of interior. Again, it's a theorem because you can prove this one. In fact, I think we'll be proving one of this, and I think it's this one that we prove. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of alternate exterior angles are congruent. So angle 1 and angle 8 in this diagram here are alternate exterior. Therefore, they're congruent. Angle 2 and angle 7, alternate exterior angles, they're congruent because line N and P are both parallel and they're cut by the transversal M. The last one, consecutive interior angles theorem, is the last one that breaks the mold. Yes, this is the one that breaks the mold. First of all, you can prove it. It's a theorem. Secondly, instead of the consecutive interior angles being congruent, the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So if I see line N and P here again being parallel for the fourth time, and they're cut by transversal M, I look at my consecutive interior angles. 3 and 5 is a pair of consecutive interior angles. So angle 3 and angle 5 are supplementary. Similarly, angle 4 and angle 6. With all these, I'm fine with you abbreviating the first part, but you still have to write out theorem or postulate. So if you would, for instance, write out the corresponding angles postulate, I'm fine with CA postulate. If you are going to be using the alternate interior angles theorem, AIA theorem. If you're using the alternate exterior angles theorem, AEA theorem. And if you're using the consecutive interior angles theorem, CIA theorem. At this point, you should be able to identify special properties of the four new angle pairs when two parallel lines are cut by a transversal. This is really it. If I see two lines being parallel and they're cut by a transversal, I now have four different things I can pull in my back pocket and say are true. That's corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interiors angles, and alternate exterior angles are congruent. And last but not least, the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. That's all just by looking at a diagram and seeing it. So next time.